Bonk's Adventure for the Nintendo Entertainment System, released in 1993. I saw this version on a store rental shelf, and quite frankly, I was intrigued on how well it was translated to the Nintendo Entertainment System, so I gave it a shot, and it was interesting. Before we get into this, I want to talk about a video game video series that I created when I was a kid called the Video Game Tape. Yeah, I was real original back then, wasn't I? Anyway, what I would do is I would record myself playing games. Why? Because I was nuts, and you already know that. But the real reason is because I was renting a lot of games, and I guess I wanted to have proof that I rented it and beat it at some point. I only put games on there that I was able to beat, and so it was kind of a log of myself playing these games. There were actually 10 volumes of this video game tape. Before I showed footage of each game, I would host the segment and I would talk about the game on camera. Now, at the time, I had a camcorder called the PXL 2000. It was a Fisher-Price camcorder. It recorded in a window box in black and white. But you know what? It was my first camcorder. I still have it. Here's a picture of it. It's falling apart a little bit, but it still works. It wasn't the greatest quality, that's for sure, but I was excited to have my own camcorder at such a young age. So I would go on camera, I would introduce each game, and then I would show the gameplay footage in color, and then at the end, I would rate them. And it's kind of interesting looking back to see how I rated a lot of these games. The sad part is I'm missing Volume 9. And guess what was on there? Bonk's Adventure on the NES. How do I know this? Because I used to tape the footage on one tape, and then I would re-record it on another tape and sort of edit it down as I was adding in my host segments. I found the original unedited tape of Bonk's Adventure and then remembered, oh, that's right, it used to be on Volume 9, which is missing. So the good news is I have footage of Bonk's Adventure on the Nintendo, proof that I played it back then. But it's not the original version that I had on tape, so I have no host segments. And lucky for you. But we'll take a quick look at the similarities and differences in the Nintendo version of Bonk's Adventure. Here's the title screen, and the music is pretty much the same. First of all, let's first go over some gameplay elements. The moves in this game are executed pretty much the same. Bonk still has the same actions. He can teeth climb, waterfall climb, bonk headbutt, and also do the bonk twirl. Now, the NES doesn't have turbo switches, but with the trusty old NES Advantage, you can get away with the super spin move. The one thing I will tell you is the controls took a bit longer to get used to in this one, and I've heard this complaint from other people. It wasn't quite as fluid as the TurboGrafx, but it was still pretty close. Moving Bonk around seemed a bit stiff in comparison, and the jumps were a little more difficult to make for some odd reason. It's almost like he didn't have as much hang time. Collecting the meat turns him into Crazy Bonk, but it's a little different. He doesn't freeze the enemies like he did when he hit the ground in the TurboGrafx version. He just basically blows them off the screen. The giant meat still makes him invincible for a short time though. Of course, the little flowers take you to bonus levels. There doesn't seem to be as many. You have the jump platform to platform, twirl to the ground, and teeth climb to the top. You still collect fruit inside springs, and there's also enemies in there at times. You know, I hate that little mother... Ugh. And we also have some hidden rooms. Again, there doesn't seem to be as many as the Turbo version, but they're there regardless. Graphics-wise, the colors obviously are more muted in that sort of NES way. The TurboGrafx is always so colorful, and the Nintendo is a little bit sort of plain. But Bonk's animation looks pretty good. His walk, meat-eating, death animations, they're pretty well done. And overall, the characters are darn close to the originals. Some vary a bit, but they're not bad. The music tracks are the same, but recreated in the NES style. There isn't as much music either. Some of the tracks are missing. The end level music is actually from Bonk 3, which is kind of weird. I guess it kind of makes sense because Bonk 3 was the last game released on the Turbo, but it's different. Not sure why they changed it. And the skull elevator takes you down to the boss fights. Speaking of boss attacks, the way to defeat them in this one is a little different. They're the same bosses, it's just like the first boss. On the TurboGrafx, you can position yourself above and just beat the hell out of them. On the NES, you can't really get up there, so you have to kind of bonk them from below. The second boss is even worse, because it's really tough to get on the top of them. So I don't know, I find myself losing more on the bosses in the NES version than I do on the Turbo. And we enter the creepy door and get to the infamous boss parade before the final fight with King Drool. This version of the game still retains that satisfaction of bonking enemies, and it really does have a fun factor to it. Now, the TurboGrafx version blows it out of the water in so many ways, but it is a decent translation here on the NES. The nice part is, if you didn't have a TurboGrafx, which most people did not, it was nice that they translated Bonk to the Nintendo and opened the world to the mascot of the TurboGrafx 16, but on the rival system. So, there's a quick look at Bonk's adventure on the NES, and I will see you on the flip side.